Great. Thanks so much for coming to talk with us. So a couple of days ago, Vogue magazine published a beautiful profile of you. I just want to, as a way of starting, read what they wrote about the book and your main character, because I think they captured it pretty. I'll let someone else do a little bit of the work. Okay. So they said, when it comes to fictional single women in the city, there's a few obvious touchstones. Andrea, who's the main character of All Grown Up, is Sex and the City's Carrie Bradshaw if Carrie drank bourbon neat, hated herself for not writing novels, and was something of a nihilist. Andrea is Girls' Hannah Horvath if Hannah had stuck with that one awful copywriting job for a decade and had become humble and expansive and soulful in the process. But if there's one character Andrea most resembles, it's Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag, not because, as Attenberg sums it up, single lady drinking and screwing, which I think we'll hear more about in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. But because in both cases, recklessness and mordant wit are the cover for deeply entrenched, slowly revealed trauma, pain that only gets more painful the more we learn about it. So that's one or a few ways of describing Andrea. How would you describe her?
I think she is, I think she's funny. I think that she's self-deprecating. I think that she is searching for happiness. She's somebody who has had the same job, given up her art career for forever, and has a job in advertising, and sort of secretly regrets giving it up, but just can't seem to find her way back to it. She's somebody who is capable of being a good friend, but also a bad friend. She's both good and bad. That's the thing that I really like about her. In terms of a writer, like it's just very entertaining to write somebody who fucks up some of the time, or a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's entertaining. Is it ever hard to watch her make a bad decision when you're like, no, I can see you go that way?
No, that's when it gets good. That's when it gets really interesting. Yeah. That's when you make things happen, mm-hmm. and you force people to reckon. These characters to really reckon with their reality.
Yeah. Before we dive more into questions, do you want to read from the book?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm starting off with something really dirty.
That is fine.
We have a lot of women in the audience here, so I was like, I'm going for it.
Yes.
So this is from a chapter called Chloe, and a lot of the chapters in the book are actually named after women, and I just really wanted that, even though this section I'm about to read is about a man, but I really wanted to make sure that there was a really strong female energy that was running through this book. We meet at a mutual friend's barbecue, Bern and I. Our mutual friend's name is Deb, and she had told me in advance to look out for him. Newly single, she had texted. Like newly, fresh out of the womb, I texted back. Successful, creative, smart, she texted. A catch, I texted. In a year he'll be a catch, she texted. Right now he's a good time. Am I not good enough for a catch, I texted. She didn't text back for 6 hours. Sorry, she texted, work. There was another pause. Am I mistaken that you want to have a good time? She texted. I'd wanted to argue so badly, but I couldn't. Bern and I have an extremely long conversation about potato salad because Deb has made 2 kinds of potato salad, the creamy kind and the vinegary kind. It is dumb, jokey conversation, kind of worthless actually, but he looks at me with obvious interest and desire. I get a little hot in my pants. He has a shaved head, the early male pattern baldness shave. He cleans his glasses a lot, and I point this out, and he shrugs and says, I can't stand fingerprints. I take his glasses from him, breathe on them, and wipe them on the end of my silky shirt. Like new, I say, and hand them back. You're helpful, he says. At some point in the conversation, we realize we live 10 blocks from each other. Convenient, I say, and grin. Deb lives in a garden apartment, and there are children running in and out of the garden and the apartment, and one of them screeches, and I shudder. Children, ugh, I say. I have a child, Bern says. Just because I don't like children doesn't mean I can't like you, I say, and I touch his arm and feel like both a failure and a success at the same time, because even though I've already fucked this up, I was probably supposed to anyway. 2 normal people walk away from each other right then and there, but instead he gives me a ride home and parks in front of a fire hydrant on my street, and then we make out in the front seat of his car while I ignore the presence of the child seat in the back. He's really aggressive, tongue in the mouth, ear, throat, squeezing my breasts hard through my blouse. I'm both mortified and aroused. I put my hand on his dick through his pants, and he stops and says, You're the first person I've been with besides my ex-wife in 12 years. I say, whoa, that's a lot for a first date. And he says, this wasn't a date. And I feel suddenly hoarse and damaged. Okay, I say, I'm done. I put my hand on the door, but I give him a few seconds to apologize, which he does. He says, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm coming or going. I'm having every emotion at once. He takes my hand and kisses it. You're beautiful, he says. You're beautiful and sexy, and you should let me take you out and we'll do this right. Toxic, says my coworker Nina on Monday morning. Drop him immediately. He texts me on Wednesday and asks me if I want to have dinner with him on Friday night. I say I have plans because I'm trying to play hard to get, which has absolutely never worked for me in my entire life. He says he can't see me on Saturday because he has his daughter that night. I fold instantly. I'll move something around, I say. We pick a restaurant in the neighborhood, but as a pretense because we both know what is going to happen. We've been texting about the things we're going to do to each other for days. It's terrible, and it's all I want. On Friday, I take off work early and get groomed in various ways. Then I go to Dean and DeLuca and buy blueberries, and then I allow myself the indulgence of a MoMA visit. I pay $25 and go up to the top floor and wend my way through the museum. Eventually, I find myself lingering around their permanent collection. All that work those people made for decades, and here's their greatest hits, one or two pieces plucked from storage. Better the one piece than none at all, I guess. I miss painting, even the fumes I miss. I've spent the past 13 years looking for a smell to replace it. Hours later, I'm smelling all of him, his fumes, a cocktail at the bar before a reservation. I'm 38 and he is 42. I'm just starting over, he tells me. Sometimes I feel like I'm done, I tell him. Dinner is fast, but I still try to enjoy myself because I love food. At the weirdest, darkest, most stressful moments of my life, I always make sure to have a nice meal. I order a steak. I want it rare, I tell the waitress, like bloody red. Carnivore, he says. That's me, I say. We drink 2 glasses of wine each, and I say, you know what we should have done? And he says, got in the bottle. I never planned that right, I say, and he says, me neither, and we smile at each other. Let's just get along, I think. All we have to do is get along. We walk to my apartment, not his, which he claims is a mess. He's wearing a hat and a chambray shirt and shorts and loafers, and he has an easy stride. I'm wearing a black dress, loose and summery, and I feel pretty and intellectually engaged after my day of art. Also, I feel drunk. At home, there is bourbon, and I tell him that while we walk, and he tells me I'm a dream girl. Like, he literally says, I feel like you were sent to me as a present from the heavens above, and I laugh so hard, but I love it. When we get to my studio, he surveys it and nods. The art, the stacks of books, the pots and pans dangling dramatically from a ceiling rack, while I shakily, excitedly pour his 2 bourbons neat. We clink glasses and then drink quickly. This is so exciting, he says. I'm so excited. I boldly take off my dress. I'm just standing there naked in front of him. I love all the curves, he says. Hips, yes. He is nodding at me, approving of me. I realize I am desperate for his approval, this man who is married, this father of one, someone else's, now mine. He takes off his hat, and then his shirt, and then his pants. He is pale white and nearly hairless, and I realize he has trimmed his pubic hair. Did you? I point to his crotch. I thought I was supposed to, he says. I read it in GQ. I really haven't seen it before, I say. I think I went a little too far, he says. I waxed my chest, too. It hurt. I waxed, too, I say. Just here, though. I motion to my crotch. It looks nice on you, he says. Normal. Our confession's done. We kiss, and then he's on me, and it's fast. It's happening. It's on. He bends me over on my couch, and from behind begins to pound me. There's a mirror nearby, and I can see that he's watching himself, watching his facial expression. This moment has so little to do with me. After a while, we try another position, and then another position, and then another position, and then another one. Can we go back, I say? What? Huh? He gasps, pushes his glasses up, looks at me. I like what we were doing before, like 10 minutes ago. Hold on, he says, and he stops to clean his glasses with my nearby underpants. Then we rearrange our bodies to the old position, and we move very slowly, and it's fantastic. But then he starts to speed up, and he goes faster and harder, and it feels like he's trying to murder me with his dick. And I say, slow down a little, baby. And he says, I can't. I'm going to come. Don't make me stop. So I don't, because this is his first time having sex with another person other than his wife in 12 years, and it's with me, and I want him to remember it is great. I let him pound me for another minute, and he orgasms loud, certainly loud enough to be heard from the street below. And he's just so proud of himself. And almost immediately I begin to hate him, but also desire him even more, too. Oh. Thanks. So romantic.
There's something at the end of that scene Andrea says about how, you know, it was wonderful and she loved it and she also hates him a little bit. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a reaction she has kind of often throughout the book. It's not that she just hates a lot of people, but something about, is it strong feelings or vulnerability from other people? She has this, like, she gets repulsed by something.
She doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to deal with things. She doesn't have like a middle ground a lot of the times. Like there's not a lot of, I mean, there is a lot of nuance to this book, but in a way there's not a lot of nuance to her life. But she's also, on the other hand, she's almost, she's 38 in that, and she's basically almost 40 for the most of the book in the present tense timeline. And she kind of knows what she wants. And like, that's cool to actually know what you want. Like, and she doesn't, you know, she's not like hard to deal with. She just in her mind is like, well, I'm not interested in babies, and I'm not interested in getting married or settling down in any kind of way. But still part of her recognizes that she wants some sort of, I don't know if it's validation from society, but she wants to like figure out, you know, how to be more grown up, how to be an adult. And she's never fit into that conventional timeline or those conventional milestones. So like, what is she gonna, she keeps seeking it, in a way.
Yeah, so if she's not choosing those sort of like the markers on the old-fashioned traditional path of like a career that you advance in and a partner and marriage and babies and a house and all of that, it's sort of like that's like how we know we're grown up. And she doesn't want those things. And so then she's a grown-up age. She has a grown-up job. She has an apartment. But she just kind of doesn't know how else to measure grown-upness.
And really the book is kind of about her, figuring out how to be happy. Not just her, but every character in the book is sort of striving for that grown-upness and that maturity, and also like the self-satisfaction that comes with age. And then two, well, actually, I don't know. I think that's really what the book is about. Yeah, like she's really seeking like what's going to be, you know, the next step for her, and how to be happy. Yeah.
Because you write about how she feels like she's stuck. Her life hasn't changed in, I don't know, 10 years or so.
Yeah.
You said earlier that she knows what she wants, she knows what she doesn't want, but she also, it seems like she doesn't know what she wants from her life in terms of that shape. One of the recurring things in the book is her conversations with her therapist, or her thinking about her therapist and how she doesn't want to go to therapy or does. But there's one section where she's thinking that she just doesn't know what she wants, that she feels stuck, but she doesn't know what she wants. And one of the ways I've heard about, you know, writing fiction or writing a plot is that you figure out what your character wants and you put them on a path and you put some obstacles in the way. But since she struggles to know what she wants, was it hard to propel her through the story?
Well, I think that one way that I deal with that is that I show all of these flashback chapters where you see who she was as a kid. You know, there's scenes of her when she's 13, you know, chapters when she's 13 and chapters where she's 16 and chapters when she's in her 20s and early 30s as well. And so all of those, I think those things propel the story forward because you get to see, I wanted to have like just a fully realized character where you knew everything about her. And I also wanted to be the story of being a woman as well, and the way that different things that happen in your life can impact you as a woman. Although I do think that men will also enjoy this book and can read this book and should read this book, in fact.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn. And also she's interesting and she's human. And what a sad state of the world that we have to fight for books about women to be seen as applying to everyone.
Right.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the structure, because you've mentioned it a couple times. The chapters, which all have different names, and the way they jump around in time. It's a really interesting structure. And how would you describe it? I
mean, when I was writing it, there were different story cycles within it, and there were different topics that I wanted to address that I felt fit into certain categories. So there's a couple of stories that fall under the where she lives apartment category, and then she has a best friend who she's watches get married and have a baby and have more adult life, quote unquote adult life moments happen to her. And so there are all these little cycles that I I don't know if other people would notice them, but I know they were there, and I felt like they sort of like, it's a very short novel, and I think that they kind of make the novel feel bigger. But then beyond that, it switches time a lot, and part of it is because when you think about the most important things that ever happened to you in your life, like you made a top 10 list, it wouldn't be in chronological order. Like you might say number one is like getting married, but number two is getting into a fist fight with your neighbor in the 7th grade, and number 3 is getting your heart broken, and number 4 is going to college. So you would be surprised if you sat down and tried to make that list. There's just not a linear path to it. And so I didn't see a linear path for her in this book either.
Yeah, and we also see there's sort of one of those cycles or through lines that's popping up is a little bit chronological as she goes from 38 to, I guess, 41 or 40.
Yeah.
And the flashbacks and bits from her past are informing that. You know, she has this memory about the dinner parties that her mother used to throw when she was 17, and then sort of as present day Andrea is dealing with that, we get the scene where we get to see what happens, sort of as she's remembering it and figuring out how it fits into her life. And so even as all of those bigger arcs are going through, each of the chapters has a sort of self-contained feeling too.
Like a short story.
Yeah.
They were all kind of originally short stories, and I wrote them all as short stories, and then at some point they had to get altered because it was clear it was really a novel, and so they had to be, I had to move things around a little bit in service of the bigger picture of the novel. Like I couldn't keep repeating things, and but the other thing is, like, I just really wanted to make an interesting book. Like I wanted it to be like interesting to read, where people are like, oh, it's not what I expected at all, and this happens here and this happens here, and so that literally every chapter, you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Like I don't know where she is in this exact moment. Like I wanted to have that experience of just it feeling really surprising and fresh and new. And I was also thinking about the way people read now, and I wasn't interested in writing these like long and lovely sentences. I was sort of over sentences, which is such a pretentious and terrible thing to say. But this is kind of my post-sentence book, which makes sense to me. Anyway, but I really was thinking about how everybody wants all the information right now. And so I wanted to just make sure that it always felt like you were finding out exactly what was happening. And I wanted it to feel true. So all those things to me, the subject matter and the themes and the form all integrate.
Yeah. Another thing about Andrea is she sees herself as a failed artist or former artist. She went to art school, and then when she was about 20, left and bailed, and has in some ways abandoned that art, although in the really beautiful first chapter, I think, we learn that in her Williamsburg loft with her view of the Empire State Building, every day or multiple times a day, she draws or paints the Empire State Building. But it's this like secret, hidden thing that feels very disconnected from the rest of her life. And one of the things she says when she's talking about going to galleries, is saying she can tell when an artist is lying or an artist is telling the truth, which is what you just said about this book. You wanted it to be true. Is that a sixth sense that you feel like you have about other novels or art?
I say that, but like you could just as easily. I mean, what is true for me is not necessarily true for other people, and so and their art also. Somebody might feel that way about this book. It doesn't. In a way, it doesn't matter, because whatever you're going to get out of this book, you're going to get out of this book, or any piece of art. It's important to me, but I don't care if it's important to anyone else. If that makes
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had to feel true to you as you were writing.
True to me. Yeah.
True is also
it's my art.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No, totally. And true is an interesting sort of goal in a work of fiction also. Obviously there's emotional truth and things that feel true.
I think fiction can somehow make something feel more real than nonfiction, because you have access to things, like you have access to her secrets, and you have access to her interior thoughts, and you know everything about you know what she was like when she was a little kid. Whereas if you were interviewing her, like if she was a newspaper profile or something like that, you really would only be able to know X amount of things about her.
Yeah. That's funny, because your last book, St. Maisie, was built in part on imagined interviews. So that one, you had the story of Maisie's life and then a contemporary person trying to piece it together and doing interviews. I don't really have a question.
No,
it's an interesting.
It was a theme also in that book because it was based on a real person, and there wasn't very much information about her in the real world, and so it was initially quite frustrating to me because I wanted to know more about her. But then it was really freeing because I realized that I could invent whatever I wanted. And it was a lesson to me that we aren't entitled to know everything, that we aren't actually entitled to other people's truths. And because there's very few pictures of her. I ended up finding a picture of that person after the fact. Really, there was, probably a handful of pictures that were ever taken because she was, this person was, what she was based on was helped the homeless for decades. And she was like a little too busy saving lives to worry about taking a selfie,
Right.
She just, so I think that I also think that our society is just like a hugely confessional society, and yet at the same time, if it's so much that confession is done on the internet, and I think we both know that everyone always seems happier on the internet than they actually are.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, so it's I don't know, I was thinking about all those things when I was writing it, like what we're, entitled to or not entitled to, and yeah.
But then with Andrea in this book, we end up being entitled to sort of everything. Like she doesn't have any secrets from the reader.
Yeah, it's true, but it's fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so circling back to that idea of truth, something that you've written about and talked about in the past is how frustrating it can be when people make assumptions that your writing is autobiographical. For 2 books ago, for the Middlesteins, which centers around a character who's very obese, you said that you would go, when you were on book tour for that, people would meet you and be surprised that you weren't also obese because they were
like, you're not fat. And I'm like, thank you.
I invented things, which can be, so just sort of like, the whole point is that you invent things and are creative, and that seems like it's been really frustrating.
But that's how I've gotten to the place for sure where I'm like, it's just my art, like it's just my thing, and so I have to learn how. It is frustrating, just on a personal day-to-day level of like having people say kind of messed up things to you, but it also like has helped me to kind of like have it removed from my books. Or forced me to have it removed from my books in a specific kind of way where I'm like, it doesn't matter what they think. I want people to love my writing. I write it so that it's going. I write it for me first, but I also like know that ultimately I want an audience to read this. I want them to enjoy it and love it or hate it or but just feel something, feel deeply. But I also know that I can't take it too personally when people don't get it. Or, I don't know, you just don't know you don't know their stories, you don't know their lives, you don't know what it meant to them or how it triggered something in them, so...
and them thinking that it's autobiographical in nature doesn't necessarily mean that it's less affecting to them.
Yeah. It's how they're reading it. Again, it's like, because everyone just assumes everything, like we're all just like documenting everything all the time, so people are just like, think it's easy for people to want to make that leap. I just don't really enjoy consuming art that way. And I don't want people to consume my art that way.
Yeah.
But I can't control it.
Well, it also, it then does, if people consume your art that way, they start making assumptions about you and about your life. And you're like, well, that's not my experience, you know? Because in some ways, on the very surface of things, you do share some aspects of your life with Andrea. Living in Williamsburg.
Yeah, she feels like a neighbor.
Yeah.
Like I knew the landscape.
Yeah, she
the same with the Middlesteins, like I knew where it was set and everything like that. But I feel like there's 5 million books that are set in New York, and the authors live in New York, and I don't know if everybody gets that question.
I don't know. Yeah,
it is a very popular question.
She is sort of like demographically pretty similar to you in a lot of ways, I think.
I don't know. I look at her life and I would never want it.
Well, yeah. Well, because that's what I was going to ask. That like, I wonder if she's in some ways like a sort of diverged parallel universe version of you. Because the big difference is she has given up her art and feels sort of consumed and troubled by that, and that's your life, is making your art.
Yeah. As I said, to me it has always felt like she was a neighbor. There was an apartment building that I actually went to go visit. Because I was thinking about moving moving out of the apartment building that I lived in, and it was 5 blocks away, and it had the same view as my view. And I always, remembered that. And so I never think of it as parallel lives. I really think of it as 5 blocks away life. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is where somebody's going to move into this apartment that's not me. Like, I remember thinking that, like, who's the person that moves into this apartment? And that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And then when I was writing this book and setting it, I was like imagining the person who lived in that apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, but it's I know the terrain.
Yeah. I mean, it's helpful. I know some writers who will, if they write in a city that they've never been to, they'll now it sounds like product placement, because I was going to say they use Google Maps and use Street View to see it. I'm sorry. But that you can, but you're writing in a neighborhood that you've lived in, and sort of, it feels, you're not like name dropping cafes or anything, but I feel like the streets are real and the place is real too.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'll take that as a compliment.
I would love to talk a little bit about Andrea's relationship with art, though, because I feel like that's one of the most, it's one of the big sadnesses in her life, and she feels like it's too late in a lot of ways. But so first, I guess, why did you decide to make her an artist, or did she sort of come that way to you?
Yeah, she showed up as an artist. I think that part of it is that I've had jobs where I worked in corporate America before as a freelancer, and I didn't even realize that this is why I was doing this but now you're like my 20th interview, so I've had to kind of dig into my brain and figure out why I was doing what I was doing. I mean, can't we just write a book and let it be? No, we must dissect it over and over and over again.
Sorry.
But I have a recollection of when I've worked in different offices doing freelance work, sometimes creative. I've done online content development and some copywriting and things like that. And but I was doing this as I was writing books. So because a lot of my books, this is my 6th book, and like the first 3 did not sell very well. So I was always writing and freelancing, and then I would meet people who were also creative people, either artists or writers, but they were all in the office, and they were like, "You're a real writer," and I was like, "Who's that person?" Right? Same as like the person living in that house. Who's that person who says, "Oh, once I was this and now I'm not anymore." Like, that was interesting to me as well. And like, how did it feel? How does it feel?
Yeah.
And also, I was really glad that I didn't have to, that I made the choices that I made, even though it was really hard and like an exceptional financial struggle for me. And I was, 40 years old, and I was still I was like couch surfing before my 4th book came out. I was really broke, but I couldn't do it any other way. Like, I had to. I just was like it was really important to me to keep pursuing it. So, in a way, I think it is. I don't think of it as like parallel lives, but I do. I have a friend who read this book, and he was like, "Oh, it's like your worst nightmare." If that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, but on the one hand, Andrea's like, it's a huge sadness and loss in her life.
Yeah.
But she also realizes that the life of sacrifice and rejection for art isn't necessarily what she wanted. Like, I'm not sure she made the wrong decision.
Right. Well, there's a character in the book named Matthew who's an artist, and he's all in on being an artist. And I honestly feel like if there's anyone that I identify with in the book with, it's that person more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Like, I get him more, like I got him instantly, where I didn't even have to dive very deep, and I just like knew exactly where he was coming from. Where you're kind of like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, I'm here. I'm like, never going to really, get there, because I've been there. I've for sure been there. So, I don't know. I think she, my intention is for her to somehow find her way back to it. When I think about the outside universe of the book, I think, oh, yeah, she'll figure out some way to like get back into it a little bit more. As I said, this book is about her finding happiness, and I wanted to write a book that was about a single woman that was not looking for the marriage or the children or anything like that. And so once you sort of like wipe that equation out, it's like, what is it then? Like, what is the thing that's really going to make her happy? And so I'm hoping that, she finds her way to that. And also like a recognition of like that your friends and your family are wonderful, can be wonderful, and maybe you have to be, more connected with them too.
Yeah, that even if it's not a romantic partner and children, it's still about finding the people around you and building that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of partnerships to be had.
We're going to open it up for questions in a minute. So we've got a microphone over there. If you want to ask a question, just go stand behind it, and then I'll know that that's why you're there. So I was rereading the book this week, and I finished it yesterday, which was International Women's Day. And it struck me, I guess, in that context, how if the book in that context felt much more explicitly political and feminist to me, that I saw so much of what Andrea was fighting against, the sort of prescribed path of women as wives and mothers, and that's the goal, and that, her personal struggle. I saw the huge social sort of leading up to it and everything, and I see that she's finding a lot of freedom in resisting that prescribed path, but also gets lost in some ways too. Mm-hmm. And this is not in the sort of neighborhood of can women have it all.
I keep getting asked that question. I'm like, I
don't
know.
But she's not even trying to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, apparently the original Can Women Have It All was like just a job and kids, and not even like all the other awful assumptions. Yeah. But she's sort of, things are harder for her because she's trying to figure out her own path and her own way of being grown up if that checklist isn't being grown up. I mean, so I guess kind of what I want to ask is, sorry, it sounds so cheesy, but I think the answer will be good. What does being grown up mean to you if it's not that sort of old-fashioned path of adulthood?
It's different, right? It's different. I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it because I had to have an answer.
If you're going to call the book that.
That's right. I had to know how I felt about it, even though how she feels about it is different. For me personally, it's about taking responsibility for the choices that I make and knowing why I'm making them, and just kind of really owning my life decisions. And that's it. That's like what it is for me, is to know why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And be able to stand behind it.
Cool.
Yeah. You can have that also if you want. It could be your definition too. It could
like
be
that.
Everybody in the room's definition. Yeah. But see, that's the thing. It's a very subtle, nuanced kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? But that's actually real, because you can have all those you could have a baby, and that does not mean you're a grown-up at all. You can buy a house, and that does not mean you're a grown-up at all. And I think it's like really about making the adult choices.
That's good.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah, hi. So thank you, Jami, and also Jami. This has been a lovely conversation. So I guess what seems really interesting about a book like this is that it keeps, once you've written it and finished, it keeps on existing in the world with different contexts. So, yesterday, International Women's Day, I feel actually much closer to the characters and kind of love them a little bit more, even when I'm like grossed out by their decisions or want to say like, please grow up, whatever that is. So I guess I wonder for you, like, what is the post-book writing process for you? Like, are you interested in kind of keeping to talk about it after, afterwards, and how it relates to current events and things like that? Or are you just like done with it? I mean, you said you've done like 20 interviews, so I wonder how that is for you.
But I've done 20 interviews, but the book only just came out 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So I actually have like a ways to go. Like I have 2 months of touring. It's always interesting to see how you feel about the book at the beginning of the tour versus how you feel about it at the end of the tour, and how I will feel about it really 6 months from now. It's going to be a different thing. But I know that. It was like a hesitation on my part to write this book, because I was like, if I write this book, then I have to freaking talk about this stuff for if the book does well, then you talk about it for a year or two. It just keeps going. And I found even now, like the Middlesteins came out 5 years ago, and I still get asked about it in interviews, which is great. And it's wonderful that people, that you get to have if you get to have a book like that, but you have to just know that it's a different kind of job, but it becomes your job. But I'm happy to, I wrote this during the 2016 election, right? Started in 2015 and I finished it in June of 2016. So there's a lot of issues in this book that I really wanted her. I like her because she can talk about anything, because she's seen it all, she's been there, and she's really wide-eyed and she's smart, and so I'm willing to go for a ride for a little while, and then I'm going to have to do something new. But I haven't been able to really shake her. Like I do think about her, and I'm ready to talk about her, but I have complicated feelings about her, because she's sometimes she really is terrible and screws up, and then sometimes she's really great, and she's just a human being. The only way, everybody's right and wrong in this book. Everybody screws up in this book, and the only way through it is just you have to just keep going through, and you can, I'm the hardest part will be for sure is preparing for people to judge her. Yeah, it's hard, but it's I think it's going to be okay. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question that's, I guess, a little bit about your own life, but I know that you did a lot of your writing of your books over the years in an apartment in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
right, in a building with all these other people and artists and whatever, and now you live a lot of the year in a house in a place that is not New York City.
Yeah.
With air around you.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how that changes your writing process or your creative process, or was any of this book written not in New York?
A lot of it was written.
Oh, yeah?
A lot of it. The final third of it was written in New Orleans,
So did it change?
and a lot of it was written on the road. Not a lot of it was written in New York City. 3 weeks of it were written at a residency in upstate New York, and then some of it was written in the fall. But I was on tour, so it was like my little present to myself that I could work on this book while I was writing, when I was just didn't want to talk to anyone. It kept me company. And so I find the thing is that I'm happier in New Orleans. So I don't know, I'm always going to write. That's the thing I've learned, right? Is I'm always going to write, but so I just wanted to be happier. Now I'm happier. So how will that impact my writing? Who knows? Maybe I'll write something really sweet next time, but I don't think so, but yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Jamie didn't really ask you about this, so I thought I would. So I really enjoyed reading about the protagonist, but at the same time there was this flip side with her brother and her sister-in-law and this dying baby that really pulled me in, and it felt like a very different plot. And I was wondering, do you feel like those two found a different way to grow up, or did they not manage it? Because their relationships is sort of breaking apart by the end. I'm curious how you feel about them growing up.
Well, they were sort of the model for she's her brother and his wife. They have a baby who was born terminally ill, and they end up leaving New York and moving to New Hampshire. This is sort of covered very early on in the book, so I'm not giving anything away. And they leave, and she feels really disconnected from them and distant from them. And they, it's really hard. It's really hard for them to survive, and it takes an impact on their relationship. I think that I don't know about him, but I feel like the sister-in-law, to me, she's the most grown up. The brother's wife, the mother of this dying baby. She seems to be the one who's really holding it together and really she's taking care of the family financially, and she's just devoted herself emotionally to it. She's if I had to think about who I liked the most in this book, I like her. I like her a lot. I respect her. I would want her to be somebody that I knew in my life. But I also love all these characters for different reasons. I think they're all kind of, I don't know, I'm charmed by all of them in their ways, even when they're messed up. But but they're I did want to show somebody who was really, and a kind of a role model-ish character. I liked her a lot.
And she's also able to call Andrea out more than maybe almost anyone else.
Yes, she is.
For her own, the ways that Andrea is avoiding life.
Yeah, there's a scene where she calls Andrea out, and it was really interesting because I had some early readers read it, and who are people who are creative people, but they're not they write, but they're not novelists. And so they just read it and they give me like sort of like a very visceral emotional reaction. They don't give me notes. And so one of my friends read it, and she is married with a kid. And she really did not like Andrea. She really had problems with her. And then I was talking to my editor about it, and she said, I think we need Greta, the sister-in-law, we need her to yell at Andrea more. Like, I think we need to, it's actually about like a space for the audience to yell, to be like, thank God that she's yelling at her and saying, you are sucking right now.
Yeah.
Like, can you please step up and be like a real human being? Can you, and so I went back and rewrote it and sort of made it a harsher interaction.
Yeah, it takes some of the pressure off the reader then, because we don't have to worry that the whole book thinks that what Andrea is doing is okay.
Yeah.
We're like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Jamie sees it. She's got someone too.
I guess so. But also, like, it's okay if the reader feels frustrated with her anyway. I don't know. It's just it's so like, I've had people read this book and be like, I totally get her and love her, and she's awesome and great. And then I've had people read this book and be like, she is the worst, but the book's really good.
Yeah.
Like, I get a lot of, I hate her, but the book's really good. And I mean, I don't know why we're supposed to love our characters anyway.
Yeah, I feel like as long as we're okay spending time with them, and she's fascinating to spend time with.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Who you're going to spend time with. There was like some review of it where they called her, oh God, mildly annoying or mildly something. And I was like, I would actually hang out with somebody who's kind of mildly annoying. Like, you think about all your friends, you're like, I got a couple of friends that are mildly annoying.
Yeah.
And like, but they have other cool things, And also sometimes we like to go out with people that are mildly annoying so then we can bitch about them afterwards. So, yeah.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, when you're in the process of writing something new, do you read at the same time, or do you have to shut out other voices?
Say it one more time. Sorry.
When you're in the process of writing something new,
Yeah.
do you read a lot, or do you?
Oh no, I read a lot.
Yeah.
But I have to be really choosy. And I didn't know. As I've written more books, I've gotten more particular about it, and not wanting. Sometimes you get sent books to Blurb or something like that, and I'm like, I'm just not going to do it because I only want to read exactly what I want to read at this exact moment. Sometimes I go into bookstores and say to the person there, this is what I'm thinking about. Like, a great bookstore clerk will just be a great bookseller will just be like, right, you want this, you want, here, I'm putting this in your hand, this is the thing that you want to read. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, but they're going to expose you to ideas that you haven't had before. Or, I don't know, I have writer friends too, and I just say, send me a list. This is what I'm thinking about, send me a list. And then I just go through and just read. But with this, it was actually really tailored because I was reading memoirs, because I wanted this to feel not like a memoir, but memoiristic. And so I was kind of reading different memoirs that had unconventional structures or styles, and were really strong in voice. And I read M Train by Patti Smith, and I read The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, and I read Chelsea Girls by Eileen Myles. Those were like kind of the three that stand out in my mind as influential as I was writing this.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you so much for
Thanks for having
coming
me.
in.